Tuesday, 3 in the afternoon. The artificial sunlight from fluorescent lamps bathed Ethan Caldwell's sterile office, turning the numbers on his screen into a soulless river. He was analyzing the spectrometry of sedimentary rock samples from an offshore drilling project in the Gulf of Mexico. The work was secure, well-paid, and respected in academic circles. It was precise, measurable, and above all, excruciatingly boring. That was everything he wanted. Safe and boring were the two impregnable walls Ethan had built to shield himself from his father's shadow. A dry ping of a new email broke the office's silence, an incongruous sound in the stillness. He glanced at the subject line, "Invitation to join in-depth survey project, Yonaguni Monument." Ethan's hand, poised over the mouse, froze. His entire body stiffened. Yonaguni. The name was a cipher, unlocking a room of memories he had sealed and locked away for 15 years. The air in the office seemed to thicken. He heard his heart pounding in his chest, a chaotic drumbeat shattering the artificial calm he had so carefully cultivated. He was no longer in his Texas office. He was 16 again, a scrawny teenager in an ill-fitting suit, sitting in the third row of a prestigious university lecture hall. The air then was thick with reverence. His father, Dr. Alistair Caldwell, stood at the podium, his silver hair, his eyes blazing with fervor, his confident stance, that of a giant in his field. Ethan's chest had swelled with pride. That was his father. The first slides appeared, intricate charts of continental shelf shifts, analyses of basalt composition. Each slide was a testament to his father's razor-sharp intellect. Murmurs of approval and the rustle of pens scribbling notes from professors and graduate students formed a symphony of validation. But then, the 12th slide appeared. It wasn't a chart or a formula. It was hazy, pale, a photograph of strange stone structures beneath the sea, the Yonaguni Monument. The room's atmosphere shifted. The silence was no longer one of respect, but of unease. And, ladies and gentlemen, Alistair's voice took on a fervent tone, starkly different from his earlier scientific calm. This is the crux of my life's work. I believe after years of analyzing infrasonic energy waves and magnetic anomalies, that we are not merely looking at natural erosion. He took a deep breath, like a man about to deliver a prophecy. I believe we are looking at an organic architecture, a form of living stone capable of generating a weak bioenergetic field, a measurable resonance. Murmurs erupted, like a hive of bees stirred to chaos. Professor Abernathy, an old friend of his father seated in the front, lowered his glasses, his brow furrowing. Alistair, a voice cut through the lecture hall, laced with undisguised mockery. It was Dr. Sterling, his father's greatest rival. Are you saying these rocks are alive? Or perhaps built by aliens? This is a scientific conference, Alistair, not an H.P. Lovecraft reading. Scattered chuckles sharp as knives pierced the air. Alistair's face flushed. Ethan felt the blood drain from his own. No, I'm not saying they're alive in the biological sense we know, his father tried to explain, his voice starting to falter. I'm saying they emit a measurable form of energy, a resonance, a rudimentary consciousness. Consciousness, another voice interjected. Do you have evidence for this extraordinary claim beyond vague energy readings that could be caused by a dozen geothermal factors? Peer-reviewed papers, perhaps? I'm in the process. So none, Sterling interrupted. his tone dripping with condescension. "Alistair, we all respect you, but perhaps you've spent too long in remote places. Maybe you need a rest." Each attempt at explanation only made his father sound more unhinged. Colleagues who once revered him now looked at him with pity, or worse, contempt. Ethan sat there, the pride in his chest cooling, hardening into a block of shame. He wanted to disappear, for the ground to split and swallow him whole. On the silent car ride home that day, his father didn't speak. The giant of Ethan's world seemed to shrink. A few years later, Alistair died of a stroke, taking his obsession with Yonaguni to the grave. Ping. The email snapped Ethan back to the present. He gasped, cold sweat beading at the back of his neck. He reread the message. An anonymous private fund, near limitless resources, cutting-edge 3D sonar, and seismic technology. They wanted him specifically to lead the project. Perhaps because the Caldwell name was both a mark of expertise and an ironic twist. They wanted one Caldwell to rectify the errors of another. This was it. His chance. A chance to go there himself, to use cold, irrefutable data to prove to the world that his father was wrong, to erase the stain of madness from their family name, a scientific crusade, an exorcism to free his soul from Alistair Caldwell's shadow. But deep inside, a small voice, one he'd tried to drown for years, whispered, What if he was right? He shoved the thought aside. That was the madness trying to spread. He took a deep breath, his trembling, fingers tapping the keyboard. I accept. The decision was made, but it left a bitter aftertaste. That weekend, instead of preparing for the trip, Ethan drove hundreds of miles to his childhood home, long abandoned. The air inside was thick with dust and forgotten memories. Everything remained as it was, a museum of collapse. He climbed to the attic where his father had spent his final years. Beneath a tarp he found it, the old oak chest always kept locked. After nearly an hour of fumbling with lock-picking tools, the lid creaked open, revealing a chaotic inner world. Inside were not just yellowed scientific papers, there were stacks of handwritten notes. Ethan flipped through them. The first pages held sharp geological analyses, his father's handwriting neat and precise. But as the pages progressed, the script grew erratic, scrawled. Scientific formulas began to mingle with strange hieroglyphic symbols, drawings of spiraling structures, and formless creatures. A thick leather-bound journal lay at the center. Ethan opened it. The early pages contained detailed sketches of Qaeda script, comparing them to Egyptian and Mayan hieroglyphs. But later pages were filled with grotesque illustrations of an entity described in trembling words. The red gaze, the forsaken, the hunger within the stone. Tucked inside the journal was a detailed map of Yonaguni, not a geological one. Hand-drawn, it marked energy flows, and a point circled in glaring red, annotated, "The heart, a prison." Beside it was a page transcribing an interview with an elderly local. The elder said it wasn't a city, it was a cage, built by those who came from the stars, the Lemurians, to imprison the red gaze that burned their homeland, the continent of Mu. They used songs and the earth's power to lull it to sleep. But sleep is not eternal. At the bottom of the chest, Ethan found an old reel-to-reel recorder and a few tapes. Curiosity drove him to load one and press play. After a hiss of static, a voice emerged. It was his father's, but trembling, whispering as if afraid of being overheard. I dove alone last night. The magnetic sensors went wild. I heard it. Not with my ears. In my mind. A song. A promise. Knowledge of the cosmos. Answers to everything. But it also good, it demands. It wants a door, it's hungry. God, it's so hungry. A sharp click ended the tape. Ethan sat motionless in the attic's darkness, the cold recorder in his hands. He told himself this was the product of a broken mind, the ravings of a man who'd abandoned logic for phantoms. He had to believe that. He closed the chest, but it was too late. The images, the sounds, the warnings, they were unleashed. They were no longer just his father's legacy. They had become part of his own journey, planting a seed of unease and fear deep in the mind of a man who trusted only what he could see and hear. His scientific crusade had now taken on an entirely different hue. The flight to Okinawa was torturously long. Ethan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, his father's journal pages flickered behind his lids, the scrawled words dancing. He tried focusing on scientific papers on his tablet, but the dry text on stratigraphy and petrology felt meaningless. They were a weak incantation against a primal fear he hadn't yet dared to name. When the ferry finally brought him to Yonaguni Island, the tiny landmass emerging through a drizzle, he felt like he was arriving at the edge of the world. Not to explore, but to surrender. The research vessel, Kaiomaru, wasn't a sleek yacht. It was a workhorse of the sea, its hull scarred, its deck heavy with the scent of salt, diesel, and a faint whiff of fish. Its rugged practicality should have comforted Ethan, but today it only underscored the absurdity of his mission. Dr. Caldwell, I presume? Welcome to my office. A man with a radiant smile and grease-stained hands emerged from the engine room. Leo Rossi, the sonar technician. He wiped his hands on a rag and gripped Ethan's in a firm handshake. Leo, thrilled to work with you. I've seen your plan. This beast, he patted a complex metal rig beside him, the Z9000 multi-beam sonar will map that trench down to every pebble. My daughter Akari calls it the shark finder. Leo pulled out his phone, its screen displaying a 6-year-old girl grinning, missing a front tooth. She's my everything. The warmth and pride in Leo's voice stirred an odd sense of alienation in Ethan. Leo belonged to an explainable world of family dinners and bedtime stories. Ethan wondered if he still did. As Leo rambled about the equipment's features, Ethan noticed someone at the stern. A woman was arranging dive tanks with silent focus. She moved with fluid efficiency, every action deliberate. When she turned, he saw it was Kana. Her long black hair was neatly tied back, her skin tanned by the sea, her eyes unnervingly still. Those eyes held no curiosity or warmth. They simply observed, assessed. "You're Kana?" Ethan asked. She nodded, stepping toward him. "Welcome to Yonaguni, Doctor." Her handshake was as firm as Leo's, but colder. "I've seen your dive schedule. Ambitious." "I want to work efficiently," Ethan replied. "The sea doesn't follow schedules," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "It has its own rhythm. We respect it or it swallows us. My rules are simple. When I say surface, we surface. No arguments." Before Ethan could respond to the implicit challenge, Kana returned to her work, leaving him feeling as though he'd been blocked by an invisible wall. The first meeting took place in the cramped galley. Ethan projected his plan onto a small screen, his voice confident as he spoke in scientific terms. He was back in his safe zone, the world of data and methodology. Leo chimed in eagerly, suggesting ways to optimize data collection. Kana listened in silence. When Ethan finished, she spread an old paper nautical chart on the table, its folds worn. It looked starkly out of place next to Ethan's intricate 3D visuals. She pointed to the monument's location. The local seafarers call this Umino-Nushi. No Toko-san is the bed of the Sea Master. Her voice was even. There are undercurrents here, no electronic chart records. Some days the surface is calm, but below it's a fury. I decide when it's safe to dive. Thank you for your input, Ms. Kana, Ethan said, masking his irritation. But my equipment can predict currents and every other variable. We're here for science, not folklore. A tense silence settled over the room. Leo coughed, trying to break it. Well, as long as the Sea Master doesn't mind Italian rock music, we're good. No one laughed. The line had been drawn. The air was cold and crisp during their first dive. The noisy world of the boat vanished, replaced by the ocean's deep silence and the steady rhythm of Ethan's breathing through his regulator. The water was impossibly clear. As they descended, the Yonaguni monument emerged from the blue abyss, majestic and overwhelming. Giant steps, flat walls, stone blocks that seemed deliberately carved. For a moment, Ethan's heart skipped. It looked too perfect. But then his trained geologist's eye kicked in. He swam closer to a wall, noting parallel bedding planes, a clear sign of natural sedimentary formation. He tapped his geological hammer on a step, recognizing the familiar sandstone structure. A strange relief flooded him. Just rock, a grand coincidence of nature. His father was wrong. He felt a surge of triumphant joy, but it was hollow, tinged with sadness. Start scanning Sector A, he ordered Leo over the comms. The work proceeded mechanically. Ethan collected rock samples, labeling them meticulously. Everything was normal, boringly so, until it wasn't. Ethan, Leo's voice crackled through, no longer casual. I'm picking up something weird northeast, a massive energy spike. It's not geothermal. I've never seen anything like this. On the wrist-mounted display, Ethan saw a section of the 3D sonar map pulsing bright red. Could be interference, he said, his mind scrambling for a rational explanation. No way, Leo replied, his voice now edged with tension. This intensity is off the charts and... holy hell, my magnetometer's spinning like a top. Something down there's generating a huge magnetic field. They swam cautiously toward the signal. As they approached, Ethan noticed something stranger. The area was a dead zone, gray, crumbled coral. No fish, no marine life. Further out, he could see schools of fish milling anxiously, forming a living, while but refusing to cross an invisible boundary. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the energy spike vanished. The signal normalized. The red patch on Ethan's display disappeared. The underwater silence now felt heavy, menacing. Kana's low, steady voice came through their headsets. The Master is stirring. We're not welcome. Surface, now. This time, Ethan didn't argue. A chill unrelated to the water's temperature seeped into his bones. Back on deck, no one spoke. Leo hurried to the engine room, muttering about impossible data. Kana silently dismantled her gear, her gaze fixed on the sea. as if listening to something they couldn't hear. Ethan retreated to his cabin, slamming the door. He told himself it was a rare geological phenomenon, a unique interplay of minerals and pressure. There had to be a rational explanation. There always was, but his hands trembled as he opened his waterproof bag and pulled out his father's old map. He fired up his laptop, entering the coordinates of the disturbance Leo had recorded. The cursor blinked, then settled. Ethan's heart stopped. The cursor pulsed exactly over the red circle his father had drawn by hand 15 years ago. The circle with a single faded word beside it: heart. The boat swayed gently, but to Ethan, it felt like the ground beneath him had split, open, revealing a black abyss, and he was staring straight into it.
In the shadow of my archive, a new horror stirs. Date to listen.